Hey, did you know that Google just released a new chatbot named Bard? Google's Bard is competing with similar chatbots like Microsoft Bing and OpenAI's chatgpt. Now, it's easier for Microsoft to take big risks when it comes to integrating it with their search engine, but for Google, there's a lot on the line. And the risk from Google's point of view is that when you have a large language model, it's impossible to completely predict what the output will be in all cases. And even though that's a risk, it also just has to be done because you're stuck in a catch-22 situation. If you don't put it out into the real world and get real feedback, you can't train it to make it smarter and more accurate in the future. Just like real human children, Bard, ChatGPT, Bing AI, they all need to go out into the real world, interact with users, collect feedback on things that they did wrong so that they can train their next iterations. And over time, they all get refined on slightly different audiences, but they get refined until they're more and more pleasing, more accurate, and they produce the kind of content that the goal vision has from the first place. And the cool thing about Google's Bard and the Bing AI is that they're both connected to the internet. So that sets them apart from ChatGPT. And in both of those cases, the results are sometimes annotated with links in the same way a Google search or a Bing search might be. Now, in some of the early testing, Google's links weren't quite as accurate and robust and common as Bing's, but Google certainly has a huge grasp on what links are clicked, and they have been the leader for decades. So that integration is probably going to come very quickly and improve very rapidly. So the race is on. It feels like Bing has an early start, and I think they're in a great position to grow because of the feedback they've been getting in the data. But Google.com is the world's most trafficked website, and when people start interacting with Bard, they can collect data extremely quickly. So they have a great chance to maybe catch up, surpass. They've been in the search game, and they've been the leaders in the search game for decades. Google's artificial intelligence named Bard is now live, and it is a direct competitor to Microsoft's Bing AI. $2 trillion companies with incredible resources, incredible talent, and incredible data sets have released world-changing technology at nearly the same time. Let's look at a head-to-head comparison.
And I got in and have done over 100 experiments comparing Bard with Bing, and Bard's explanation was pretty misleading and terrible. To be honest, Bing, even in creative mode, when you ask it to tell a joke, it really can't do it. These jokes are just awful. What do you call a chatbot that can't write poetry? ChatGPT, laughing face. Bard kind of gets this and says things like, what do you call a Bing search? A lost cause.
So far, dates seem to be a particular weakness. Now, the YouTuber AI Explained actually put them in a head-to-head comparison and asked about the difference between two dates, and they both got him wrong.
Don't trust either of them on dates. I asked about how many days were there between the opening of the Eiffel Tower and the Statue of Liberty, and both got it wrong.
And I would say across the board, Bing AI seems to be better, but when it comes to jokes, definitely Bard has an edge.
Oh, I wanted to test both of them on joke explanation. Did you know if you get pregnant in the Amazon, it's next day delivery?
Asking them both to explain jokes was fascinating, and they both impressed me. And the fact that Bard took it more seriously might also just speak to the fact that Google just has more on the line than Microsoft, so they can let it be a little bit more relaxed, take a little bit more risk with the way that their training data is telling it to play and have fun, whereas Google's really just don't make a mistake and screw up this incredible cash cow that we have. Hit that subscribe button if you want to keep up with the best in technology and artificial intelligence. In this corner, we have Adobe. In this corner, we have Nvidia. These two companies are teaming up to make some next generation artificial intelligent models. Adobe is all in on integrating artificial intelligence into their suite of services. And Nvidia is such a great hardware company, and even on the software side, especially when it comes to artificial intelligence research, they are top tier. I see stuff coming out of their research and development group that I don't see anybody else matching. And for an example of that, check out the eye contact feature that is in the broadcast suite. It's like the craziest thing I've ever seen. But I digress, and this is about Adobe. Now, Adobe Firefly was also announced. Now, Firefly is a new tool that can generate amazing images and text, and what it generates is also able to be done for commercial purposes. And Firefly will integrate into the Adobe Creative Cloud. And expect more integrations to come. Adobe definitely wanted to make a point that they are working on ways to integrate it into the Document Cloud, the Experience Cloud, all the workflows that people love from Adobe, and even more will be coming down the future to create video and 3D assets. Now, Adobe's in a very interesting place when it comes to generative art. And that's because they have so much loyalty from creating decades of rapport with their loyal creative users. So if their customer base starts to feel like Adobe's using the data and the images that they generated to create something like Firefly off the backs of their work, it might not be the greatest thing for Adobe. And that's just a luxury that the smaller competitors like Midjourney and Stable Diffusion and DALL-E just don't need to deal with. And that's why I think with their announcement today for the new text-to-image generator called Firefly, they made a point to also mention that they're super committed to content transparency with their Content Authenticity Initiative, also known as CAI, not CIA, CAI. And that's an initiative to help people understand if the content that they're looking at was either generated or modified by artificial intelligence. The Chinese search giant Baidu has created a new chatbot to compete with ChatGPT. But unfortunately, Ernie Bot did not have the ideal launch. The demos were pre-recorded, and the results just didn't have the same wow factor as ChatGPT does. But if you're in China, considering you don't have access to any of the American products like ChatGPT or Bing AI or Google Bard, then it might be more impressive than anything else you have an option to use. Microsoft, Google, and OpenAI have already faced a lot of backlash because these models definitely do say things that they wish they didn't. And there's no doubt that there's going to be similar issues for Ernie Bot. But despite the mixed reception, some users were impressed with Ernie Bot, especially because it excels at handling Chinese idioms and regional dialects. And the first mover advantage means a lot. So in China, if all of the American companies are blocked out and Baidu's the first to market, that's the feedback they're going to need to make it iteratively better. Whenever you're training a model or building an application, there's a phrase that's called garbage in, garbage out. It's hard to make anything produce something of quality when you don't have good data to start with. But when it comes to an iterative process, like training one of these large language models, even if the data is not great when it first goes in and the initial output is not good, if real people who care about the machine model being better in the future actually give it the correct feedback, it will correct course. And in these last few weeks, when we've really seen things like ChatGPT and Bing and Google and Baidu and even Facebook putting their models out into the wild, I encourage you to actually respect the feedback mechanism. These flawed models will lead to future models that will end up making important decisions in all of our lives. So I don't think it's the right time to sort of like troll on it and like mess with the data and try to throw it off, because if we actually just refine it like a child and have it grow up into a responsible adult, it's going to be better for all of us. Did you know that the Facebook version of ChatGPT, which is called LLaMA, can be downloaded and run locally on your computer? And a few modifications to that model, specifically one called Alpaca that came from Stanford, and it can even perform relatively close to ChatGPT and GPT 3.5. Meta has released LLaMA. This is an AI language model that's meant to help researchers with their work. LLaMA is a fundamental language model, and despite the fact that it was trained on less parameters and is a smaller overall file size, it performs surprisingly well and even better than ChatGPT in some situations. And LLaMA's smaller size means less computing power, and less computing power means more people can access and study it. And potentially more feedback, which is the real key to advancing these models. These smaller models are also great for fine-tuning on specific tasks. And with large language models showing that they can do everything from coding to solving math problems to writing poetry, there's a lot of use cases where you want to take a base system like this that's actually able to run locally, tweak it on your own data, and tune it into something that performs specific for your use case. And LLaMA is a great place to start for those kind of issues. Also, the big, huge models that take lots of computation like ChatGPT, Bing AI, and Google's Bard, those are also always going to be pretty much stuck on the cloud. You're always going to be behind some kind of a paywall or an API where you don't have full control over where and when you want to tune it. Facebook's LLaMA, this large language model, is actually trained on 20 different languages also, meaning it can spread around the world very quickly and be used for a lot of different people. And of course, one side of the coin is with these models, people can do what they want with them. They're free to make and invent and create. The other side of the coin is that there isn't a centralized entity to try to keep track of what NSFW and what bad things are actually created with it. But as of right now, Meta did release this with a non-commercial license. So what you create is yours.